It does. I told you she should start accessorizing. My friend, my sister.
Madam Mayor, we are live.
Thank you and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City of Lake Worth Commission work session regarding redistricting. This is purely informational. We're going to be hearing a report from the FAU representative, and there will be no public comment and maybe no comment from us either. Who knows? So thank you very much. Can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Betty Rush,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McFoy,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes,
Here.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here.
Thank you. Well, I'm still up to my game. So we have a representative from the FAU who has done a study. I have it here. But what? Oh, Pledge of Allegiance by, I'm sorry, I'm going to say.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great movie, by the way. Okay, we're going to have a presentation and a discussion of the FAU report on the analysis, and it's going to be given to us by James Gammack Clark, who is a senior instruction in the Department of Geosciences. Please take it away. And I didn't mean it that we won't have discussion because we always do. It was a joke.
Good evening. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. As noted, my name is James Gammack Clark, and I am a senior instructor with the Department of Geosciences. And I'm here this evening to present the results of our analysis into your City Commission election districts. So here's a brief outline for the presentation that I'll be going through this evening. I will briefly introduce the redistricting team that's working on this project. We will talk about that part of the city charter that's pertinent to redistricting. We'll talk about the process that we've been asked to engage in by you, the city. We'll talk about the data that we've used in this analysis, and then we'll get to the meat of the presentation where we discuss population analysis. So specifically, we'll be looking at both exclusively the 2020 US Census enumeration, and also a 2024 population projection that we've been asked to provide for you. We'll then move on to next steps if you decide that there are indeed next steps to be taken. So in addition to myself, also in the Geosciences Department is Dr. Ron Schultz. And then we also have on the redistricting team, Dr. Stephen Barrasso and Michael Stamm of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at Florida Atlantic University. The charter doesn't go into great detail about the redistricting process, but what it does do, which is kind of unique, is it specifically lays out the boundaries that the 4 districts should follow. So specifically, it states that District 1 should encompass all territory west of Dixie Highway and south of Lake Avenue. District 2 should be west of Dixie Highway and north of Lake Avenue. District 3 should be east of Dixie Highway and north of Lake Avenue. And District 4 should be east of Dixie Highway and south of Lake Avenue. Here we see that part of the city, the southern part of the city, that highlights in a little bit more detail districts 1 and 4, excuse me, and the northern part of the city that highlights districts 2 and 3. And I can state from a cartographer's perspective, that's me, I'm a computer cartographer by training. You know, the boundaries are nice and neat and compact, really chef's kiss type of alignment. But unfortunately, that might lead to some population equity issues that we'll talk about in a moment. So we were asked to tackle this process in 2 parts. A part A, where we analyze your existing districts in terms of their population equity, and then to proceed, if you direct us to do so, onto a part B, where we engage in a redistricting process. And it's under that part that we would begin to create map options for you. So obviously we're not at that stage yet, so no map options have been created. We're only looking at the existing districts as they stand as of today. So the data that we've used in this analysis is the same data that's been used all across the country on all of the various redistricting efforts, whether it's done at the municipal level or at the congressional district level. That is that we've used the US Census 2020 Census Redistricting Summary File as laid out by Public Law 94-171. However, specifically, we've used the smallest enumeration unit, which is the US Census block. And that's necessary whenever you're engaging in redistricting at the municipal level, so that you can get in and carve up the cities along the local streets and so on and so forth if need be.
Turn on your microphone.
When you say census block, does that refer to street blocks or does that refer to a census term?
It's specifically a census term. So the idea is that if you're in an urban area, it might be a small city block that you would typically associate. But as the densities get less and less, the blocks get physically bigger and bigger and bigger to accommodate more people. So each of these city blocks will be aggregated to each of the 4 voting districts. The other set of data that we've used at this analysis is housing data provided to us by your city staff. And specifically, this data was used to create a population projection. And the reason that you'd go with the idea of a population projection is that you don't want to go to all the effort and all the expense of engaging in the redistricting process only for those districts to quickly fall out of alignment if you have a great deal of development occurring. And of course, there has been and is projected to be some significant development occurring in your city that would certainly have a significant impact upon your population balance. So specifically, we're looking at homes that have been built since Census Day of 2020. So that's April 1st of 2020, that's Census Day. That's the date that the enumeration tries to count all the people that are in the United States of America. And then also we were asked to forecast out to account for housing that's supposed to be built by 2024, built and occupied by 2024. So if we look at only the 2020 enumeration data, we see that the population of the city of Lake Worth Beach is 42,219 people. If we divide that number by 4, this gives us an average population of 10,555. So ideally, if we were looking at the 2020 data only, that's how many people should be in each of the 4 districts. Digging a little further, we see that the largest district is District 2. It has a population of 14,149 people. That's 3,594 people more than the theoretical average. The smallest district, meanwhile, is District 4 at 6,539 people, and that's 4,060 people fewer than the theoretical average. So what we find then is that just looking at the 2020 data, the current commission districts are heavily unbalanced. The total deviation is 133.31% between all 4 districts. And that gives us a spread. That is, if we look at the population deviation associated with the largest district and add that to the population deviation associated with the smallest district, that gives us a spread of 72.1%. This far exceeds the maximum 10% overall deviation that's standard for redistricting. The population projection that we've engaged in looks again at all of these developments that are ongoing in your city and have occurred since Census Day. Using these unit numbers, we've created a population projection that means that 4,508 people will be added to the city by 2024. Specifically, the majority of these people, 3,588, will be located in what is already your largest district, District 2. So if we look at this population projection, we find that
Excuse me, James.
Yeah.
Go back to that other slide.
Certainly.
I know I interrupted you, but I noticed that the Gulfstream is not listed on there, and I do believe they have 80 some condos,
92 apartments,
92 condos that will be there, and that is going to be District 4.
And when is that going to be completed by?
25. I think is when your projection is. but it's a significant amount and they're partners.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can use whatever planning horizon you want. You know, historically, we try not to get too far out ahead because there's a lot of uncertainty. You know, you might have other developments that are coming on by 2025. So to state with certainty that, you know, the number that we project for 2025 will be accurate, the chances of that get far less and less as we get farther and farther down the road. Okay.
The thing is, we really don't have that much open space. I mean, the Gulf Stream's gonna be built. The Bohemian, the Deco, you know, the ones that are already approved and in the works. Well, we don't see applications for all that. We don't see them. They don't come to us unless it's in, you know, plan.
But I'm saying, are these all things approved? Sorry, are these all projects that have been approved through our planning and zoning? And these are solidified projects?
Well, the two big ones would be the Deco Green
Right.
and the mid up on District 2,
I mean, the Bohemian's done.
and that's in District 1.
So what I would recommend is, you know, ask your staff to reevaluate the list that they provided us. And if there's anything that's really not concrete, then we can certainly take that out of the population projection.
I think that's important.
Or perhaps, I mean, the Gulf Stream is, because it's a smallest district, and that would be, you know, 92 living units, and it's been approved, I mean, it's in the process with. Doesn't matter, well, let me ask a question then, let me ask a question, these people, and we have the same question, I think.
I think we do.
Okay, I'll voice it, being the mayor and all. The question is, we're talking about people,
Mhm.
not registered voters.
Correct.
We're not talking about homesteaded properties, correct?
I mean, we don't stop to look at whether or not
That's my
the,
question.
correct, yes.
So it's not homesteaded. So if someone owns if there are 90, let's just say 90 apartment houses going to be built, apartment units going to be built up by the Gulf Stream. And some of those people may have them as their apartments, so it's going to be a little more year round than a condo might be because it's not so much a snowbird.
Mhm.
But let's say half of them are people that don't stay here the whole time. They still get counted as a living unit, as people.
So the way the census works and the way the projection works isn't going to be the same, right? When you conduct the census, the person has to identify, yes, this is the place that I'm counting as my primary domicile, and this is where I'm living, and that those persons get counted there. Obviously, you don't want people being double counted. In terms of the population projection, we don't have all that information. So the best that we can do is take the persons per household average as defined by the US Census and multiply that by the number of units that you're coming online. We don't suggest that this method is perfect. What we suggest is it's defendable and it's the most consistent methodology that we can use to make a population projection for your oncoming housing. And it's standard protocol.
And we asked this question of you before the meeting, but I just want to, for the public, one question that I've been asked a lot of times is, you know, we're not talking about registered voters. We're talking about people that don't vote, people that are not registered, people that are perhaps transient, but happen to be caught in the census at that point, undocumented people. It's just, it's a number, it's heads, it's not
It's people.
anything but that.
Indeed, that's absolutely correct. So whether you're 1 day old or 99 or 110, it doesn't matter. You deserve representation by the city.
Okay, but you're
Yeah.
saying that, but I'm just going to come back a little bit with that,
Certainly.
because if we didn't have this, the assumption would be if we weren't talking about single district voting at this point, that would, the way we've done it all these years is everyone votes for everyone and everyone is then represented.
Mhm. Even though in that case, we've suddenly done redistricting process where all the commissioners are elected at large, and you still would typically try to achieve population equity between your districts.
If the mayor was saying, so we have a significant population that very likely. We have a significant seasonal population that in many cases are registered in Northeast somewhere or other or somewhere else.
Registered to vote. Yeah.
Registered to vote, correct. And I understand that the methodology tends to go by heads, but it would be in fact a double counting if somebody is registered somewhere else.
So
I don't know what you do about it, but
here's what you can do about it. So if you only were to use the US Census data, there's no double counting. People are counted only once.
That's true, right.
Okay.
Expensive is single.
So the only time we have to worry about double counting, it would be if you're talking about the population projection. But that's impossible to define in advance with a crystal ball, whether these people can be primary domiciled in these units or it's going to be a vacation home.
Right.
Census has nothing to do with voting, and redistricting has nothing to do with the voting, whether it be at the municipal level or the congressional district level.
I think that's important to highlight because it's really important, I think, for a lot of people to understand. You mentioned earlier that there's certain data that's not available, homestead exemption, things like that. But that's probably better because for the work that you need to do for us and what we need to accomplish, we're looking for equitable representation. So whether or not someone pays property taxes or how much, that stuff doesn't matter. You're literally counting, pulses, heartbeats, human beings.
Humans, correct.
Whether they pay taxes, whether they're documented, no matter where they fall in terms of community, they're a part of the community and they all are represented by us when they're within whatever lines we come up with.
Absolutely. You get to represent babies too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As long as you don't have to take them home.
Indeed. I'm glad those days are over. Any more questions? Okay.
Keep going.
So if we, once we've established those numbers, if for a moment we assume that those housing numbers are good, we could project that the city of Lake Worth's population will be 46,727 in 2024. Again, if we divide that by 4, that'll give us an average population of 11,682 for each district. So this would be the number that we would be working towards. This would be the number that we would strive to get as close to for each of the 4 districts. So the largest district would again be District 2. It would have a population of 17,737. That would be 6,055 more people than the theoretical average. So basically almost the population that District 4 is right now. The smallest district is District 4 at 6,680 people. That would be 5,002 people fewer than the theoretical average. So again, what we're seeing is that the population balance under this projection would become even more extreme. The total deviation would grow to 153.51% between the 4 districts. That would be a spread of 94.66%. And that gives us, obviously that far exceeds the maximum 10% deviation that's standard for this type of
Standard required.
It's standard and it's typically required by law. These are the thresholds that when these cases go before a judge, they usually specify, hey, you must at least
10%
hit
either way.
10%. Certainly there's been, and you can certainly speak to your city attorney about this. There's some case examples where judges have been even stricter than that. They would suggest that your mean deviation should be less than 1% or something to that effect. But 10% is the standard.
Do we have to take this to court, or is it only taken to court if it's challenged?
Correct.
Okay.
So, what would be the next steps? We would certainly recommend that you proceed to Part B. Again, your election districts are heavily out of balance as they stand at this moment, even though they're nice and compact. From a cartographer's point of view, I like the nice, relatively even 4 quarters. The city needs to redistrict. The overall pattern of district boundary changes needs to increase the population of districts 3 and 4 while reducing that of districts 1 and 2. This, of course, will necessitate an adjustment of the geographic boundaries where districts 3 and 4 must expand in size while districts 1 and 2 must contract. So if you ask us to move forward, we will certainly create map options for your consideration. Interestingly, the city charter does not provide guidance about the redistricting process, but again, it does specifically lay out what those boundaries should be. And again, that's kind of unique. And so at the minimum, you'd need to revise that language, if not take out the specific description from your charter entirely.
And we wouldn't have to do any of this if it wasn't for the single district vote that we just had.
Well, again,
Because everybody voted.
we just did Green Acres, for example, and everybody votes at large in Green Acres, but you still seek equal representation, each equal populations in your districts where possible, because again, you're defining the pool that your commissioners are chosen. So it should be an equal number of pool that your commissioners are chosen from.
I think it would have been very helpful, and since you do have the numbers, I think it would, I see everybody's like, she's first, and, I think it would have been helpful, since you do have numbers, if you had provided us a map of what the projections, how that would have, we have the map of how it is now. You've got the numbers of equal and unequal and your projection for 2024. I really question why we don't have a map that reflects what it would look like.
Well, that was how we were contracted to do this project. We could have done the project however you liked. If we had been asked to come to today with the map options, I would have been happy to do so.
Specific request we had to make.
Yeah. So the way the contract is written is broken into two parts. We're contracted to do an analysis, not to create map options. And then only if you decide to proceed, then there's a different set of funds that would go towards the map options
It
process.
doesn't sound like, if we're gonna go, if the voters decided to have single family, single voter districts,
Mhm.
do we have a choice?
Again,
we're so out of whack
I
with
would
our
refer to your city attorney, but I would imagine that you'd be exposed to significant liability if
We have no
you.
choice. I'm looking past you to our city. She's like, there's no choice. We got to do this if we're gonna do this.
We can't not know this.
Okay, I'm gonna call on some commissioners for questions. Commissioner Maliga was our first.
When you do come back with maps, you should be mindful of where the representatives for each of those districts live.
That's
So I am just looking at where I live is like smack dab in the middle of where it could be drawn. So that's gonna be like, how do you guys do that? Like, if there's a commissioner who lives here and you want to slice that district, that's gotta get interesting.
indeed. And I was just about to go through the parameters that we use in the redistricting process, and I can certainly address, it might be better if I address that question just one moment.
Okay.
So these are our parameters when we go through the redistricting effort. The first criterion is to achieve reasonable population equity across the districts. So as I've been alluding to throughout the presentation, we try to make sure that we come under a maximum 10% overall deviation from the ideal size across the districts. We certainly also seek to adhere to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And of course, that means that arbitrary dilution of minority population classes and other discriminatory practices are strictly prohibited. And we also seek geographic contiguity and appropriate compactness. Obviously, your existing districts are the ideal as far as that goes. So in creating those districts, we would seek to follow major natural and man-made boundaries where possible, maintain respect for the integrity of communities of interest, and minimize the degree of change in pre-existing patterns of districts. Obviously, population equity also is of primary importance in that regard. And then the others are significant in guiding our decisions towards reaching reasonable population balance. To go to your question about redistricting commissioners out of their districts. Obviously, this is something that we would strive not to do. We would strive very hard not to do that. However, what we can't do is favor one person so heavily that we end up with districts that start to look, we use the G word, right? Gerrymandering, right? So we would,
No
indeed.
gerrymandering.
No gerrymandering,
Yeah.
right? So, and for that reason, because we do not gerrymander, we're Florida Atlantic University. We're not some private entity, private consultant, right? Florida Atlantic University would never engage in gerrymandering. So, what we would do in the worst case scenario where that became an issue is we would provide you multiple options, and then we would let the powers that be vote options up and down.
What kind of options? That's what I'm curious. Like, you get to step down, or you get to swap
No.
districts, or I
think he's talking about carving things out a little bit.
So we would
Gerrymander with a small G.
no, not even a small G. No caveats, no accents. Okay, so again, it may not be an issue. The obviously we haven't engaged in the map creation process. What I have noticed is that from just taking a small peek into the future, if we look at the borders between the east and west districts, the population density is pretty low, which means that the changes that we're going to be looking at could entail some pretty significant area in terms of the size of the area involved. But again, we're certainly going to give you at least some map options where no commissioners are redistricted out of their districts. And in the worst case scenario, there may be one or two where there is that situation, but then you'd have the option of voting them up or down. Then the question comes to your city attorney again. If we were to present an option where a commissioner was redistricted out, would that commissioner be able to complete their term?
Because then two people would be in the same district. So which one is?
Well, until the next election, I think. I mean, my thought on that, just off the top of my head, is that you're elected in a general election.
Mhm.
And we have another election there. Our next election is 2024. I would think that we would hold the position until 2024 because we are not yet single voter districts.
Madam Mayor, I think if an issue comes to this and we need to address it, I think one option too would be looking at the implementation date. For
Exactly.
redistricting
Right.
and try to time that in such a way that something like that would not occur where someone becomes disqualified from serving.
Okay, perfect. Commissioner, are you?
Okay, just make sure that staff is mindful
I don't know.
to give to James and his team our address.
I have it. I already have it.
Mr. McBoy has a question.
I just want to go on the record that the two of us, our last names start with M, and we are the commissioners in question. I don't know whether it's significant, no, but I do have a serious question. I suspect, I haven't thought, I know approximately where you live, I know fairly well where I live, and I suspect you're right, that if we were
Glad to hear it.
simply to move the line westward, which would be the most logical thing, push it westward and watch the numbers, and when you get about right, you quit. And it might be a different line for the two smaller or larger districts. But I think both of us are close enough to the Dixie line that it's quite possible that we would get districted out. We'll deal with that problem when we get that far. I intend to apply for, that the city will move my house as it is with no further alterations. It doesn't do us any good. We both had in fact, we're both at the problem. No, but my very serious question was, I think it's important for the city and us to be clear, regardless of whether we had voted as a community to change to single family,
Single map.
whatever the
Single,
technical name
you're
is.
doing it right. Single voter.
Single district voting,
right.
something like that. We've probably been in violation of this 10% for a number of elections.
But
I guess.
there's no 10% if it's all at large.
No, but there.
I don't think that's true. I believe that, I mean, I don't know, you probably know better or behind you. But I would guess that technically, regardless of how we elect people, the commissioners are supposed to represent. And we've probably been out of whack.
Which is why Green
Yes,
Acres did theirs.
The reason, of course, is that if you've got a commissioner representing District A of 1,000 people and a commissioner representing District B of 2,000 people, that means that the residents of District A get twice the attention from their commissioners as the person from District B.
No wonder my phone rings.
Theoretically. Commissioner Diaz.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a moot point, but like, since the last 10-year review, I mean, I think I remember when we voted to get this study going, and deep down, super wishful thinking, I was like, well, you know what, maybe it's not going to be like that big of a difference, and we're going to be able to keep lines way off on that one. But yeah, I mean, part of me is a little bit curious about how we would have gone this long with this kind of deviation. And I would say, and I don't know if this is in your guys' wheelhouse, but not just in providing maps, but I mean, hearing about, like, I know our charter designates like physical location, which to me is a little bit weird. It's a little bit limiting and it doesn't have really good foresight. So like, I'd be curious on what are recommendations? What are other towns that you've worked with? Like, what are other charters? What do they look like in terms of the policy that's out there? Because we seem to be a little bit short-sighted when that policy was put into place.
It was probably in 19, I don't know when it was amended, if it was ever amended, but we're talking about 1913.
Yeah, so
There weren't that many people.
it's time to, bring it up to modern.
I'm sure we could provide some examples
Yeah.
of some of the other cities that we worked with, of their city charters and how it addresses this or doesn't.
Although would
occasionally.
the charter have to address it if we come, it'll be in the charter that these are the new districts. But it seems like the law tells us how we have to do this anyway.
So, well, it's two different issues. So in terms of the charter, your language could say something to the effect of the city shall be split into 4 districts and not specify the specific geographic boundaries that address those districts. Only because every time it means that every time you have to go through the redistricting process, you have to go up and revise your charter. So
Right.
it just makes for extra legwork for you and your staff.
And charter revisions are cumbersome sometimes.
And then other charters, they get very specific as to what your districts should look like in terms of population equity and deviation and how often it should be completed or not. So we've seen a great deal of variety as we've gone from one city to the next.
Commissioner Malega.
Just one question. Is there any way that you guys would add a district, like come back and say, we recommend 5 districts for the city versus 4?
No, if we were given
No.
if we were given direction to mind the city, hey, we've decided to add a 5th district, can you please create some maps for us that had 5 districts? Then certainly we could do that for you. But again, the charter calls for 4 districts, so until your charter calls for 5, then we would not consider that.
I like sitting next to Carmen. Where would we?
I know, where would you put her?
Some of the people used to sit here all the time.
Well, yeah, I know the clerk was there, the city attorney was up, I sat in your seat for 5
Yeah.
years.
Nice and cozy, eh?
Very cozy. And I had to have the whole book and the ordinance book in front of me. That was required. I had this giant ordinance book at every meeting. It was hysterical. Questions. I think we've been asking.
Yes, you have.
I don't know where my light is.
Oh, here it is. Ask a question.
Well, it's just more of a comment. I'm not sure of the details, but I think a lot of my district has, in the areas that were traditionally multifamily, we saw a lot more of those duplex, triplex, where ADUs used to be allowed, had been over the years been downszoned to mostly single family residential. So when you have, like my district, I'm not super surprised by this because the majority of my district has much lower density
Right.
than
So look
than the
forward,
places
Sandy.
coming out west. And I do think where we're seeing a lot of the density being added is right along Dixie, where I think it's appropriate to have density between Dixie and, the train tracks as we're looking at that strip. So I know we're looking at new developments coming online for 2024. Do we look at zoning? Because it doesn't seem like District 3 would, in its current state, would ever catch up with the zoning that's in place.
We'll just move. I think if I'm wrong.
Right.
Your line would go west. You would take some
Right.
people away from Mr. Boyd here.
So again, one option would be to move lines west. One option would be to move that east-west dividing north-south line along Dixie west. But that's not the only option that we can consider. There could be some type of, counterclockwise or clockwise rotation, a give and a take. I wouldn't want to presuppose anything.
Oh, okay.
And in terms of adding people, if you're not adding developments, then the way to add people is to add territory.
Right.
And commercial properties are not counted as heads. We have a big, okay.
Correct.
Commissioner Milligan.
Just 2 more things. So I noticed in one of the slides, it was about being equitable against
Indeed.
all demographics. And right now, economically, our boundaries are very disproportionate. So one would think going east to west across the city could be more proportionate as far as economics go. That's one thing. The second thing I also noticed on here is I don't know what the formal place, the Lord's place. I didn't see that on the list either, and that's going in District 4 as well.
The Burkle place,
Burkle on
Is it
Dixie and then,
Burkle 3, I think.
Yeah.
yeah.
I
there's
didn't see
2
that
of
on the
them.
list. So those are more that will be here within by 2024.
But there's,
I don't think they're permanent housing. I don't know if that counts.
yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
It's transitional housing, but there's two in District 4 right now, the one on Dixie Highway and the one on South, Day Street.
So if by transitional, you mean renters?
No, like halfway houses.
I see.
Transitional from homelessness to.
Supportive services.
I see, I'm got you. If that was their domicile, then they would
Yeah,
have
you're
to,
gonna answer the census. Obviously, there will be bodies there, whenever the census comes out.
The new one's gonna be like, how many people? Not a lot, not a big place. The new,
Rooms maybe,
something like that.
yeah,
It's for older.
20.
Commissioner Diaz.
Okay, yeah, a couple of things. I mean, first, well, I had a simple question, and that's in terms of growth. Do you differentiate or does it just not even matter the difference between like people moving in versus like people being born?
no,
It doesn't matter, right? Yeah.
people are people, where they come from.
Yeah.
And then of course, when you do population projections, traditionally, you're counting for births and deaths and in migration and out migration.
There's a formula for everything, including the how many kids and people have, yeah.
They go in, they come out.
Yeah. Yeah, mathematical formula for everything. And the other thing, and it's more maybe of a comment or thoughts on my fellow commissioners on, like I very openly was not very supportive of single district voting, but of course, the people chose and
Mhm.
I would be supportive of that. I know it's difficult, and I think this report is a little bit confirming like the fears that I had, but it's also a good thing in a way because this is kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid. Like the number is just atrocious. 153+% deviation is just so awful. But I was wondering, like, maybe we can. This is something, we threw around the G word earlier, and this is something where like maybe we should kind of take a little bit pride on doing this hard work, and that we're doing pretty much the opposite of the G word, and that we're trying to make it
Mhm.
more equitable. And this is, we live near one of the most gerrymandered legislative districts in Florida.
School board. district,
Yeah,
everything.
school board, and then
Ridiculous.
like, if we can, maybe do a little bit of outreach or a little bit of pride in saying, this is what we're doing to like really bring in the equity, I think it would be helpful.
And let me just make a comment. One thing I want to point out to the public, and I've gotten quite a bit of feedback from the public on this issue, because when we all said single district voting, people didn't expect that there was going to be this shift going on. It was just, okay, one is one, two, right? So I want the people out there to know that what you're telling us is, even had we not gone for single district voting, this is probably something that we should have done, or that should be done anyway.
Yes, I mean, certainly the issue is,
This brought it to the fore.
it's worse when you have single district voting. This makes the situation more egregious when you have single district voting, but still, the districts should be evenly divided.
Right. I'm getting a lot of pushback from folks about this. So I just want to put out into the universe that this is not just a result of the single district voting referendum that we had. There's a little self-protection.
Right.
Commissioner Boy.
It's gonna happen anyways, and it needs to happen.
Yeah. Commissioner Boy.
I too agree with that. That's something that the community needs. We need to help educate folks in the community. This drew it into our attention a bit more, and I don't know why we never thought about it before, because I suppose if I had thought about the numbers, I didn't realize, I was surprised at how far off.
Yeah.
Probably all of us. We probably would have guessed that it was somewhat off, but not that one. I'm just curious, and I think I'm hearing that everybody's in favor of going to the next step. Draw us some maps. And we're all gonna go, what?
Mhm.
You mentioned that although from the photographers, I suspect that well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could move the north-south one too. It doesn't have to be Lake Ave. You could move that up a little bit. That wouldn't help 3, And up four a little bit, but it wouldn't help the imbalance between 2 and 3 in the same one.
Yeah, top as well.
But I think from what I heard you mention, the number, the name that sticks in my head is, which I don't know where I got. You know, in terms of drawing maps, you can draw anything you want. You can draw any boundaries. You have laid out for us some criteria, and the law lays out some. You can't draw a circle around a known minority boundary or group, and you're supposed to try to pay attention to traditional neighborhoods. That's, some of those are more obviously defined, some of them are less obviously defined. I'm just curious what sorts of things, if you feel at liberty to, you don't have to.
No, I can honestly say, you know, when we engage in these processes, you know, you suddenly, I don't want to make this all about money, but you don't want to do work that is not guaranteed you can get paid for. So we haven't gone through this process of actually looking at these districts. All I've done is I've taken a very cursory look to look at the type of density we're talking in here, and to move around approximately 5,000 people per district. It's going to require a significant amount of aerial change. But again, it doesn't necessarily have to be purely down one east-west line. We're just speculating here, but you know, if the goal is to keep 4 even quarters, for example, as close as you can, where you know all the quarters meet in one intersection, then the chances of that impacting a particular commissioner grow. If we don't constrain ourselves that way, and we allow ourselves to be a little bit more free, trying to still create compact borders, trying to move along major thoroughfares, natural boundaries where possible, then you know that gives us a little bit more flexibility, where we can achieve all our criterion without moving a commissioner out of his or her district.
Ms. Davis, I see your light is on.
I wanted to make a comment when we talked about this process and what we had to do this regardless of doing the single district voting. This is also a process that is typical and responsible for communities every 10 years of the census. So it goes beyond just because the voters changed it to the method of the single district voting. This is just the responsible, usual process that you take after the census.
Okay, because I'm getting a lot of pushback about this, I have to tell you.
Populations does change and shift.
Most of the city charters that we've worked with stipulate that after the decennial census, you shall engage in redistricting, so on and so forth. Some even go further to say that, and if it's known that your districts fall out of alignment, that you should engage in redistricting even sooner than the decennial census.
Well, let's not be hasty. Commissioner Diaz.
I like that we're going step by step. I think, like I mentioned before, we're at least I was kind of secretly hoping that it wasn't going to be so drastic. But I guess my question is, and this might be city manager or you, James, but is there like a hard deadline from supervisor elections? Because you know, before we, even though it's a way out, is there like a hard deadline where we have to make our changes, everything's submitted, and we educate the public, make sure they know that things have changed?
To the 2024.
Like, what are we looking at? 20?
Yeah, I do not personally know that. Obviously, you know, this is the last redistricting project that we've done in this cycle. So it seems like you're ahead of the game for the next particular election cycle, but I would again refer you to your city attorney.
Right, yeah.
We're progressive.
That answer kind of lends to that question lends to the answer that Christy mentioned, that we can determine that.
Right.
But of course, we tried to make sure we were prepared ourselves to, if you wanted to implement this during the next election cycle or not. So, but it has not been determined.
What would the time frame be if we say, you know, a consensus, we bring it to an agenda and vote to go forward? What would the time frame be then for you to come back with those maps and different options? How long would that take? I'm not saying rush. I'm just curious along those same lines.
Yeah, I would have to refer to the contract. I believe it was by the end of well, obviously the first contract we drew up, those timelines got blown out of the water. But I think the last set of dates had us with some options by the end of the month, end of September.
I
But
think we,
for this phase of it.
right, so
Could we
mapping
Could we
options.
take the visual down so that people can see us talking? I think that's something that
I think Afonso will come out. I think he'll hear the request.
it's frustrating to watch it and not be able to
Yes.
see who's.
I
talking.
did it already, Madam City City Manager. I changed it. Now they can see all of you.
Oh, they can. Oh,
We
okay, great.
Change the one in the dais. But, oh my goodness, I forgot what my-
Time.
oh, yes, timeframe.
Mhm.
So I think the next step was to provide mapping options by September 21st, because we were scheduling a public meeting, I guess, for the public to review options of the map.
Okay.
Well, that seems hasty. I mean, we don't have to really implement, we have the time out that we can implement it.
I agree. If you're not comfortable. I mean, that
It's a
is
quick
pretty
timeline, so.
Yeah.
But that was what.
It's not a question of comfort. We can walk to suit.
Yeah.
That's 9 days from now. I mean, we could have some options available. I mean,
Thank you.
I would refer to Stephen Barrasso, he's the project manager and working with the city manager on the timeline. In terms of those timelines, I just do what I'm told.
Because I
you know.
don't think we're in a hurry for this, frankly.
No, but I also think there's an advantage to, maintaining the initiative and the momentum in this process.
Yeah, because I think, and this might be a question for Christie is, this was voted, the single district voting was voted on. So, I think from a perception standpoint, at the very least, it was voted on in the last election. We should be ready to deploy it at the next election because it's what people want clearly. So,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. So I think but it seems like it's far away, but these things I think can get away from us. It seems like I'm having a hard time. I mean, cartographers are such a underappreciated career
Thank you.
field because I'm having such a hard time understanding just how in the world you're gonna figure this problem out. But I know you can. It's a difficult thing to solve, and I just don't want that deadline to sneak up on us.
Yeah, we don't even have we don't even have a deadline. So,
Right.
Commissioner, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Lega?
I, for one, would like to continue moving forward because as far as community outreach, I think it's very important that once we get these maps in front of us, that we go to the people.
Yep.
That we don't expect people to come here.
Right.
And if that means we have to have a district meeting in each district,
Mhm.
there's 4 months, right? Right
Yep.
there gone before we make a decision. I think it's very important that we take our time with this, not move the train forward fast, but keep it on the track.
Absolutely.
And make sure that we are as, the outreach as much as we can before we make that final decision. It's going to impact the city or at least the next 10 years.
And the citizens, it's certainly something that the citizens need a lot of input into if we have different options. Commissioner Stokes.
I just wanted to check. So if the deadline was to get us the maps by the 21st, that was when were we going to talk about them?
Well, the maps were going to be generated for the 21st, but they certainly can be, they will be ready prior to the 21st. They would just be available for public review. How we determine what that public view or discussion is up to you. I did have some questions regarding that. So what the first meeting could be a commission meeting to review the maps and then take them out for public view and comment and suggestion.
I know with this meeting, there was concern that the backup wasn't
Right.
there in time. So I just want to think about the timing of when do we get the maps and how many days before we meet about it so that the public has a chance to look at them before we meet.
Yeah, I would agree that we have a quite generous policy that when we post an agenda, the backup has to go out
About
11 days.
10
before
days,
something.
11 days, right?
It's a fair ways. So obviously, if we're gonna talk about it on the 21st, then we would need the maps yesterday.
Yeah, right.
And they're not ready.
That's not how
I mean, we're talking 9 days. I'm thinking, if we could finish like October I don't know.
Yeah, I would say, let's keep, I mean, I agree with you,
Well-
let's keep it moving, but let's not be crazy about it. let's make sure that you have time to do what you need to do and get it to us in time to put it, the backup out as our normal schedule.
Yeah, so what we can do, we can work with the team to determine when they'll have the maps prepared, and we can plan the next meeting 2 weeks after that
Yeah.
in order to be in line with our policy.
Deadlines.
Yeah.
Okay, they're gonna work it out.
Yeah, we're gonna work that out because I don't know my dates right now in front of me. I don't want to say
Yeah,
a wrong
we're
date
flexible.
for the public.
Commissioner Legge, I have a question for you, and I think the point that you brought up was excellent, that we have to get this out to the people. Now, you mentioned 4 different, districts. Would, as an alternative, could we perhaps have the dreaded word charrette? To have one to invite everybody to the table to talk about it, rather than 4 dragging it out over 4 months? Just a thought.
I think if we do that, we have to be mindful of where the shrine is and make it equitable to where everybody can get to it.
Okay.
Oh, I think if we do that, we have to be mindful of where we have it, so it's equitable that everybody has access, and we can't just do it on a Saturday afternoon. So it would have to be something like, the Hatch is done,
Mhm.
5 days, 6 days in a row. And make sure that, that we try to get it to the community that doesn't have access to vehicles or to come to City Hall. So having it at the Hatch building would be just like having it at City Hall. We have to, I'm mindful.
But let's say, we're a little concerned about the time frame.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
So if we had one, on the south side, let's say at Osborne Community Center or at the gymnasium, and we could invite, District 4 and make sure that, it's more access for District 4 and District 1 to get to that
I
center.
was gonna say, you can combine 2 districts.
That's what I'm
Right,
saying.
right,
And then
yeah.
do one more on the north end, where we could have more access for District 2 and District 3, maybe at the golf course. It's not really,
it's too small.
too small.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, find something that's central that people can walk to and have 3 or 4 days to get to. So we can collect as much data and have as much information as possible.
Combining 2 districts, that's, I think, a good idea.
And not 1 and 2, because we already know that we are already, we're heavy.
You guys are,
And,
Commissioner Stokes had her light on.
No, it's great bringing up the point about what we had at the Hatch with the CRA, because I do think instead of spreading this out one a district over 4 months, I think if we could do several days in a row with the flexible hours. So if one night it's like 6 p.m. after work for people who can come after work, and you do have Saturday morning, I think for me, if we had it spread over 4 months, but it was always like the same time of day, then you're not reaching different
Right.
groups of people. I think keeping it compact as far as this is the week but we can even have it in different locations and or different times, but like, because if I look at it, I say, I can't make this, I'm not like, oh, but a month from now,
Right.
I'm gonna remember what I can do.
Yeah.
But just having that menu available, like that, I think would be the most effective.
I think we would do like this Osborne, the senior building and the Hatch building, like 3 days in a row.
Commissioner Diaz.
I'm just looking back at my notes from when we got when we first agreed to this study, and it was May 3rd was the commission meeting. Even though I didn't write it in my notes, I know you guys presented that was part of this step, is to have public meetings. Was it a meeting or multiple? But yeah, either way,
Was that part of the original, part of the original contract?
Well,
part of the process.
typically, those public meetings involved first reading, second reading on the ordinance. The contract does not involve, I don't believe, attending workshops with the
So
community.
you need to talk to Ms. Davis about your next contract.
Madam Mayor
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Commissioners, I actually pulled up the contract,
Okay,
so I can give you some information about what is in there.
please do.
Okay, so we're supposed to have a public meeting to discuss the analysis and collect input next Wednesday, the 21st. This is part of Part B. And then the next thing is submission of a report describing 3 map options and discussion of considerations. That's supposed to be in early October. Then a public workshop to discuss the map options, and commission meetings for the first reading, and then a meeting for the second reading. And then none of these have dates, they're all TBD. And then provision of GIS layer with approved districts is the last thing.
So it doesn't actually anticipate sort of city, like what we're discussing now, citizen meetings.
Right, but. help
Yes,
me-
next Wednesday is supposed to be a citizen meeting, Madam Mayor.
Well, we don't have the map, so I think that's probably.
No, I think what she was describing was a public meeting where we go over this same report that I given you this evening
Right.
again.
So if I can suggest, is it possible, James, that, yes, in the contract, we have about 5 steps in Part B. That's the next step. So we have 5 steps within that Part B. Is there a way that we can, based on the desires of the commission, can we work through what type of meetings we have within the allotted meetings that we have in our contract?
I mean, we're flexible. We're happy to work with you.
So if it's the desire of the commission to have once you draw up the options, I'm hearing that you want to have a discussion on the maps once the options are available, and then go out to the public to get their suggestions and thoughts and responses. Is that how you see that?
I think it would be helpful for us to have a heads up before we do go into the public, but
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure I'm on the right track. So when I have the conversation in tailoring our meetings based on the contract.
right.
May I make a suggestion? In addition, not instead of, but in addition to what you're all describing, for many of the projects that we've done in this particular cycle, many of the cities have posted a page on their website where they include all the various steps that we're going through and include the options. And it's just another way of outreaching to the public.
Yep.
Okay.
Commissioner, Vice Mayor McCoy?
I hear the suggestion, and we happen to have had recently, a few months back, it was a land use issue thing, so there was a very visual and map sort of component, has some overlap in that sense. And the Treasure Coast Planning Council kindly agreed as part of their contract to be there. I don't know, it's quite a bit of hours, 10 in the morning to
We don't
10
need
at
that
night
much
for
time.
4 days. I suspect the contract price would go up considerable if we were to request that. So I think we need to be somewhat realistic of what we can afford as far as, we definitely want to make it, multiple ways that people can get. I would think about just experience with dealing with this stuff. Maybe a window of several days with different kinds of times and so on, and then do it again a week or 2 weeks later, because usually what happens is the first round of people hear about it, and then it gets out and we, I missed that, I didn't know, and then come back, shorten the number of days in the first and split it over 2 periods. That would be my.
I like Commissioner Stokes' idea of doing it, on a Saturday and then one in the evening so that we can capture. So that, that would be 2 meetings. So now that would be increased it to maybe 3 meetings or. That's right.
Go to the neighborhood association meetings and make sure that we get as much input as possible as well. Let them know ahead of time.
I'm fine with that, but I can tell you from my district that I have, what did I have? Something or other, 7,000 people or 10,000 people. And at the neighborhood association meetings, we're lucky if we get 10. So that's not a very representative way.
Well, but then people need to be, I think people need to take some responsibility.
Well, we
being
need
more
to,
involved.
I agree that we need to do outreach. I think the web idea is a perfectly reasonable one. We might want to add some languages to it. I think the other piece that we haven't really talked about is everybody's going to have an opinion of what they want the map to look like. And somebody's going to need to convey to people, whether in person from FAU or some other way, hey, here are the constraints on this exercise. It's not an unconstrained, you can't draw any old map.
No, they're going to be those.
There's quite a bit of constraint on it. Now, one thing that would be wonderful is if it's possible, I don't know whether the contract works or the technology, but this is not a complicated GIS problem to move a boundary and see what the numbers do. You can almost do that on the fly. And say, well, what if we draw a thing around Commissioner Malega's house or my house or whatever? What does that look like? Well, it looks really weird and doesn't look like a good idea. You can fiddle with that.
If I might, just to give you some insight from the past projects that we can do. Can you carve up? There are a billion ways to carve up the pie.
Right.
Obviously, we want to avoid that. It's obviously not practical, right? So we're going to try to, give you some different options. Usually what we do is we say, okay, this is the option that would give you the best population equity. This is the option that would, change your existing boundaries as little as possible. In this case, that's going to be very, very difficult. But, we usually come up with, 3 or 4 rationalizations for the options that we provide. What we very much want to avoid is, the reason that we're here as expert consultants is to insulate you from the accusation of gerrymandering. So we want to make sure that the recommendations are coming from us to you, and then you vote on them rather than coming from the dais down
No,
to
I
us.
absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, we
We don't, it's not like, what do you think? It's like, here's 3 or 4 options. Before we vote?
And then the other consideration then is, you're right. Again, we can carve up the pie in a billion pieces, but what we can't do, if one of your residents wanted to provide a map and say, hey, could you take a look at this? We would certainly do that. But what we can't do is have a billion such options and keep going around and around the mulberry
And
bush.
you're the experts,
We are.
And
and we have to recognize that.
And that, that really that highlights something I was thinking about, and something that needs to be a little bit cleared up, because Carmen asked a question about, should we hear about it, then hear from the public, then hear about it again, or, to Vice Mayor McVoy's point in terms of cost and efficiency and getting through these meetings in an effective manner.
Yeah.
I think, or should we also consider, or would it be better to run it like a charrette? I mean, it's somewhat like a land use issue, but
It's much simpler.
James and his team can offer options, hear from the public, and then bring it all together as a
Yeah, in terms of expediency, I mean,
Yeah.
if we get it at the same time, the public's gonna get it. I mean, we can figure it out. before
Right, we
get
can
to the
review
public
it.
Meeting
He can hear their comments, and then we get it all together on here
to vote as a vote.
Because we're not influencing anything. You're gonna
Right.
present us a handful of maps. We'll look at it and say, okay, I like this or not.
Mhm.
And
then
then the
we'll-
public will go see the same exact map.
Exactly. So we might as well just do it
Right.
all in one shot.
Mhm.
Well, you may not. You may
Okay.
not.
No.
Well,
Here comes the voice of reason. Mom speaks.
Well, I was thinking that I thought it made sense to have a presentation of the options, a formal
Mhm.
presentation.
Okay,
And so not only will you see it,
right,
and
everybody will.
ask questions and comment, the public will also be aware of it. And so after that meeting, that presentation, then they can have the more informal presentation where they can interact and ask questions as they review the options closely.
And we can post that presentation
And
so
we
the
will-
public has seen it, they understand what it is that the outreach is talking about.
That's
We don't just show up one day and say, hey,
Right.
to this redistricting workshop.
That's
What
right.
is that?
That's right. And we will display that information in 2 ways. One, you can come to the meetings where the maps are displayed, ask questions, give your comments and suggestions. And then we will also post them online
Right,
where they can, if they cannot attend one of those 2 meetings, that they can also go online, review the maps, and provide their comments and suggestions online as well. And so then after that, we can then put together those comments. You will see those comments at the next meeting, which could be what I'm thinking, a meeting to receive the comments. It could be at a public hearing,
Mhm.
where you now say we receive comments. If there's opportunity for people to add
you mean just at a regular commission meeting?
regular
Yeah,
commission meeting,
yeah.
right? And then receive comments, talk among yourself, and then you can either vote that day, or you can have
Then we have the
to do the formal voting.
then we have the meeting. So if I'm right, if I'm hearing you correctly, have it presented at a regular city commission meeting,
Yeah,
right? And then have the more public meetings out there in the public,
that's right.
and then come back for a vote.
Yeah, we'll come back for a public hearing to talk about, because I don't know if anything would change.
So
Help me, James.
indeed, we've had similar situations in the past. Hollywood, the city of Hollywood, for example, whenever we create an option, say we come back with 3 options, option A, B, and C. Once they're out there, those options remain on the books, we wouldn't take those off the table.
Okay.
What we could do, though, if we get, a particularly salient point from the member of the commission or one member of the public, is we would create an option 1A, where we make a slight revision of option 1
Due to public comment,
due to
in
public
response
comment.
to public comment?
Yeah,
But like you said, if somebody that lives like right on the boundary
Right.
line knows something that we can't expect the professionals to know and brings up a really great point, then they'll go do it, but not every single public
Yeah,
comment.
exactly.
exactly. It would be impossible to create a map that satisfies everybody.
We're not going to do,
Indeed.
Yeah.
we know that.
Yeah, so what we've done in those situations is, okay, well, maybe option A addresses this concern, while option B addresses that concern. We try to, please as many people as we can, but it's, again, impossible to please everybody.
I would almost, I mean, in just off the top of my head, I would like to see if we could keep it as close to the traditional quadrants as we possibly can. How, instead of going into pie-shaped districts and things like that. So, but that's just me. Madam Davis,
Sorry.
okay. So what's our next, what's next? What do we
I
do
move
next?
to move forward with Plan B.
Okay, we don't have to
Step
vote.
B. We don't have to vote.
Yeah, so.
But we
so-
can consent.
Yeah.
So what I'll do, I will work with James to come up with a Part B plan
Mhm.
of the meetings, and we will try to stay in line with the contract number of meetings to meet the desires of the commission, how they want this process to roll out.
Okay,
And I will then, and we can follow up on Wednesday to get the final process, because we don't know the dates right now. And
That's a special meeting just about.
no, a pre-agenda meeting.
Oh, the pre-agenda meeting. Okay,
Talk about
perfect.
this,
Thank you.
follow up and give you an update on Wednesday.
Tomorrow? No,
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yep.
I don't even know what day it is anymore, honestly. It's Wednesday of this week.
Yeah.
Okay, today's Monday.
That's right.
Thank you. One loses track.
That's right. And Tuesday.
I've been on medical leave for 9 weeks, so days mean nothing to me
Yeah, I know.
anymore.
I hope you feel better soon.
Especially when
It's recovery from surgery.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So Madam Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
then I'm going to assume that we will not be having a public meeting on September 21st, as it seems to be premature. We need more time to plan for this.
That's right.
That sounds correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a comment?
Yeah, it seemed, I'm looking back at the criteria of what you want to optimize for and what the law directs us to optimize for. Two thoughts with that. One is, if you, when you come back with the maps, there's a reference to minority population clusters. There's also a reference to I think it's called communities of interest or something or other.
Correct.
If you could pull together when you come back to us, the mapping of any of the things that meet those criteria so that we're looking at it and we can say, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable drawing of that boundary, or no, that's not a very good drawing of the boundary, or actually that's so mixed that there isn't really anything. So that we know the pieces that go. I see some hesitation.
There's a little bit of hesitation. The reason that there's hesitation is, if we only concentrate on people, the heads, and strive to stick to major thoroughfares where possible.
It's pretty straightforward. Except
But it's also, we cannot be accused of gerrymandering because we're not gerrymandering. We're not drawing boundaries with race and ethnicity in mind.
Exactly.
So the moment we start looking at that, you say, "Oh, that's a neighborhood that I could split up."
Right.
That's not what we're doing. So the law states that we're not supposed to go in and specifically divide up communities, and so we don't do that.
right.
And we don't we don't even look to where those potentials could be. Now, if there was a particular district, for example, that was a majority population, that's something I would have addressed in this presentation this evening. I would have said, okay, District A is a majority African-American population. We need to make sure that at the end of this process, it remains a majority African-American population. That's not the case in here. The racial and ethnic breakup of the city is very diverse. And the only district that I recall that is a majority of any ethnicity is District 3, if I can, let me confirm that. Sorry, I have the slide. If you want to pull up the PowerPoint presentation again and just hit it, I don't have control of the. I'm sorry.
What page?
Yes, in your packet, but in the PowerPoint presentation. Oh, yes. Okay. So indeed. So District 3, as I'm absolutely correct, it has presently, but this is suddenly going to change because District 3 is suddenly underrepresented, has a 67.1% white population. That's the only district that has a majority population of any particular race or ethnicity. But again, we're going to be adding 5,000 people to District 3, so that those numbers are going to change.
If I could follow up, the other biggest one, so I appreciate that clarification. It seems to me that if you stick to the criteria of more or less natural boundaries, well, there aren't really, it's basically just roadways. And we already put it at the big roadway. Well, that doesn't work because it's not equitable. So you probably move it to some roadway parallel to that in west. The big problem that I suspect that we're going to run into is, well, if you do that, you just made a problem for two commissioners who happen to live in the wrong place. And you don't want to do some really weird drawing around one person's house who happens to live there at this point in time.
But there's you're absolutely right. So what that would suggest then, Commissioner, is that, maybe one of the options that we present to you is an option where you do have as much as possible a north, south, east, west border. Okay, and let the chips fall in where they may. And if that means that a particular commissioner becomes redistricted out of their commission, then that's up for you to vote on yay or nay.
But like the city attorney just said, the date that we decide to do implementation of this would be an important piece of this.
Absolutely. And then the other alternative is a happy medium is what you're describing. Do we have to do a weird boundary? No, but we can if we don't care so much about them being perfectly rectilinear blocks, and we can do a bit more of a Tetris type shape, then we can solve this problem. Yeah, Tetris. It's an old video game from when I was young. Yeah,
Right.
I like people.
not T-ball.
Yeah, and although I would point out, Madam Mayor, that for instance, if a commissioner wants to run in a future election and they got redistricted out,
They'd have to run in a new strip.
I guess, yeah, I don't know.
Next time we're up for election, this is going to be in place for the 2024 election.
Right, so if one of us got redistricted out, we would get redistricted out before the election.
Right,
We need
with
to have these
the
set in place.
implementation date, right, Attorney?
Madam Mayor, I believe it might be the implementation date, but I was just looking at the counties, are required to go through this process by statute. And there's a case on the counties and they said, if there's a redistricting while you're in office that redistricts you out of your district, that's not something you did. So the courts have said, therefore,
Okay.
you still qualified to hold office because it was something that was required to change the district. So, you can make an analogy, obviously, to municipalities as well with that. So we're going to have to do some legal research on this because there's some different issues. We worked with them on Green Acres and that was pretty straightforward. We've got some unique situations here. As this process continues, hopefully more and more issues will get resolved and move on.
But if that were the case, then let's, for example, Commissioner Stokes, you're next to me, so I'm going to just use you, is redistricted out. she could serve out her term, but when in 2024, she would have to run wherever she happens to live.
I believe that would be the case, but we'll firm that up so we can, give you the best advice on what would happen depending on where this leads.
Right. Commissioner Diaz.
I know I'll probably get this question, so from members of the community, so. Thanks for bringing up the diversity aspect of it, because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, or clarify it, if you, just like how now we have the chef's kiss center point of the city, like easy map, you use a
I
ruler.
don't even know what
That's
that
when you're like,
That's perfect. It's the best meal I've ever had.
yeah, the best, perfect.
I never
So,
need to ask a stupid question.
right, so.
Not stupid question.
So we have the easy mode map now, and I'm almost curious to see as an option, and I think you can't go down this road, is what would be the chef's kiss map of, perfect diversity, equity, and you can't even go down that road because that brings up, constitutional issues of class and whatnot, because I know that's going to be a top question.
No,
I get.
We wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot
Right.
barge pole. Again, the only thing that our guiding principle is that if we identify a community that's majority minority population, ethnicity, race, ethnicity,
Right.
then we cannot drastically change that, especially with malicious intent.
Mhm.
We don't engage in that policy. So again, it's better to stay away from it entirely and just go by major thoroughfares, population equity, and then we're good.
We're not Robert Moses in our city. You know who that is, right?
I'm not familiar with Robert Moses.
Oh, New York City, he was terrible. He divided, he in the Bronx, he put the throughways through communities. He broke up communities. Some people called him brilliant, but he caused a lot of harm to the ethnic communities in the city.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, certainly when we come back with our analysis, we'll show you what that does to the racial and ethnic makeup of the proposed districts. Using the 2020 data, obviously we can't project race and ethnicity for the population projection, but for the 2020 data, we can give you those numbers.
Okay. Oh, look at the light was behind my back.
Were you given a map of our neighborhood associations?
No,
Okay, is that something we want to consider? Because if,
Yeah.
right, so we have.
Well, but I mean,
I imagine that most neighborhoods would like their entire neighborhoods represented by one commissioner, not two. I think if we could minimize, there may be how many, do we have 16, 20, how many?
we have a lot of active neighbors.
13 functioning. So if only 2 of them were impacted, rather than all 13 or, something, just another thing to consider.
no, it's
Divided on lines that made sense geographically too.
indeed. So it's an excellent point. And again, it's in the criteria where we would try not to break up a community of interest like that. However, again, the primary criterion is population equity. So if we can avoid breaking up a community, we will. There have been cases in the past where breaking up a neighborhood is necessary, but we will strive to avoid that.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do have one question.
Okay,
So I know that this isn't supposed to have anything to do with it,
but
but the mindset in our city for years has been certain districts control the voting outcome, which is how this came about of single district voting. I would also like to see, only for information purposes, now that we're looking at different maps, the different precincts that would be represented by those maps. Is that possible?
you mean
Voting precincts.
legislative?
Yeah, voting precincts,
I mean, that will not,
which was also just changed recently.
that would not factor into our analysis. However, if you wanted a map that overlaid the new voting precincts, that would be possible. However, I think you might be walking towards the fire there.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I think that the reason our population in District 3 and 4 is so swayed is because a lot of those people are snowbirds. So unfortunately, I feel that the bodies are there because we know that they're there,
That's true.
but they might not be there during, well, a lot of those condos, especially
Not that many, I mean, it's mostly single family,
My, over my geographic,
and
it's smaller
DS.
and
Yeah.
less dense.
Yeah, a lot of it's a lot of, they're registered elsewhere. Their home is somewhere else technically. So, yeah, that's a valid
But
point.
I think of 3 and 4 as more single family home districts than, I mean, there's a couple of big condos. Well, the big condo at the bottom. Well,
But
Okay.
both those issues are gonna be doubling in size.
Yeah.
So, they're gonna be, their existing makeup is gonna be quite different from what it's gonna be by the time we're
Yeah.
done with this process.
And either way, I mean, seasonal, permanent, like, it doesn't matter. There are people in our community, so they're gonna get represented.
if they appeared on the census.
If they're on a census, which is, I'm sure there's a formula, mathematical formula for everything. I'm sure there's a formula for the QA/QC, that discrepancy as well, I'm sure, but yeah.
Commissioner Stokes.
Just one last thing, based off what Commissioner Malega had brought up. So just to clarify, you do not look at precincts, like I was precinct 3040. I don't know what precinct I am now, but so in my precinct 3040, there is a potential that half of the people that live in my precinct would vote for one commissioner and the other half might vote for another one.
It's not a consideration for us.
Okay, I just figured for the ease of making ballots, I know how much a pain it is.
Well, it's-
Ballots and stuff like that is usually easier.
So usually the way this process works, I mean, we would have been, obviously the pandemic delayed everything, right? So obviously, normally we would have been doing this a year and a half ago. And we would finish the process and then the supervisor of elections would take your new boundaries and then draw the precincts accordingly.
Mm,
Oh, okay.
okay,
Yeah, we are very gerrymandered in this. I mean, we have two, in our little town, we have 2 school board representatives. And I didn't even know that until recently, that I was not going to vote for Erica Whitfield. But we have another, person to vote for, so. Okay, anything else? Is this the shortest meeting on record?
is it?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you
been
very much.
Very enlightening. And for those of you that listen to this, please listen carefully. We've tried to cover as many questions as we possibly can. The next time this is going to, just so that I can get it in my head, the next time this is going to be discussed is in public is, well, the agenda meeting, but at a commission meeting will be, we haven't determined that yet.
That's correct. And
Okay.
hopefully Wednesday, we'll have a suggested date.
Okay. Okay. I don't even think we need that, but we can have it. I just want to put a plug out though. I want to plug something. I have a shameless plug on Facebook, and this has nothing to do with redistricting. I have put out, and I'm hoping to get a lot of participation. It's a little short because I wasn't here much this summer, but the German witch dance for Halloween. I'm asking for a lot of people to join in. If you go online and onto Facebook and look under my name, you'll see it. It's hysterical, and I'd love to see a community effort to get out the German witch dance. It's a short dance. There are instructional videos on YouTube. It's hysterical, and I would love to see this become part of what we do at Halloween. So that's what?
The costumes are.
It's hysterical. I mean, it would be it's so fitting for the city. So that's my shameless plug. Thank you very much. What? Okay, it's the 28th, so it's not really, so fine. So be inflexible. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.